Oh, sorry, I was muted. So sorry again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this next episode of this Tech Thursday. I know we have all been expecting David. You have all been expecting David Smith. Unfortunately, David couldn't make it today, but don't worry. He's going to join you next Tech Thursday next month again. So it's going to stay, let's say, his domain. This time, I was asked if I could, let's say, take his place. So I'm the older version of David. Obviously, David is the best technical expert we have ever had. So I don't, let's say, match his qualities, but I will try my best today. And when I was asked to do this Tech Thursday, I was actually wondering what is the one of the most common questions that I'm getting asked from people when we do photo workshops, photo walks and stuff like that. And basically, I figured that one of the mostly asked questions is, how can I customize my camera? In this case, how can I customize my OM-1? So basically, this is what today's 1 hour, let's say, lesson is going to be about. And I was thinking that I will just give you one free lesson of actually customizing your OM-1 camera. So if you have it by your hand, it would be great. If don't worry. This YouTube is going to be recorded as always, so you can watch it anytime in the future and go step by step by the settings, obviously. But it is obviously better if you have the camera by your hand and try it as I talk. So today I'm going to obviously show you my camera. So this is going to be my setup. This is my camera ready right here. And you will also be seeing the menu of the camera. So what exactly I'm setting up, how am I memorizing the functions and so on to the C1 to C2 and so on to C4 settings. We'll also be talking about function buttons, which are very much connected with actually customizing the camera the way you want the camera to behave. So it will be about C1 to C4 settings, function buttons, obviously, but not only about buttons, because as you know, there are some dials, there are some levers, which you can also customize. So all this, hopefully, I'll be able to discuss today and show you today within the next 1 hour. So let me just very briefly see some comments. Yeah, it's all hellos from, well, from everywhere. Hi, hello from Germany, as I see, hello from USA, hello from Washington, even good evening from a warm and sunny England. Oh, for a change, my great. Exactly. Here in Czech, we always think that in England it's always raining. So you probably in this brackets you are saying that it is most of the time raining, but for a change. So lucky that you have got this beautiful and amazing weather now in England. Actually, it's partially raining here in Czech, so we have just swapped the weathers for a while. Okay, so hello from Denmark, Madeline, USA, everywhere. Lawrenceville, am I saying it right? So hi, Brian, and hi, everyone. Many greetings. So, but let's don't wait any time, and let's jump directly into the camera menu. So what I will do is I'm going to switch my cameras, and what you will be seeing is my camera menu. The reason why I put this flower, I think it's orchid. I'm not a biologist. I'm not specializing in flowers at all. It's my wife is, but I stole this flower so that you are not watching the black background, because I thought it would be nice so that once we are going through the menu, from the control panel, that there is something nicer behind than just a black background. So I just put this flower in front of me. Okay, so let's jump right into it. The very first thing which I am going to do is I'm going to reset my camera, because yesterday evening I just returned from a photo workshop, and this camera was in hands of many users. So they just made all sorts of settings. I don't know which ones. So basically what I'm going to do is reset the camera. So this is just an information for you. If you want to sometime reset the camera to the default settings for whatever reason, because you might have set the camera in a certain way, you forgot it, then you take the camera the next day and it starts shooting, I don't know, bluish colors, or the noise seems to be too high, you forgot maybe high ISO and stuff like that. So you may obviously go to the menu, to the control panel, and look by item what you have changed and change it back to your settings or to the default settings. But the very easiest way how to reset the camera to the factory settings, basically returning the camera to the time when you were unboxing the camera for the very first time, is going to this reset initialize setting, pressing OK. And if you want to fully reset it, then you go to initialize all settings. So I'm going to do this because this camera is totally like reset it to all kinds of settings which I didn't have control over. So I press OK, again, yes, just to make sure the camera is asking you all the time if you really want to reset it. And then I press OK again. So now I have finally reset the camera. What stays is the date, and time. You don't have to, again, set up the date and time. And if you are from different countries using different language than English, you might be using, I don't know, German, French, Czech, whatever other language, then language also stays. So the date and time and language stays, even though you do the full reset, which is good. You don't have to set it up all the time again. Okay, but today we are going to talk about something totally different. We are going to talk about custom modes, C1 to C4, first of all. And where you find them in the menu is right here. So you go to the very first yellow menu and the very first page, which is called Basic Settings, Image Quality. And the very first item is exactly what we are looking for, and that is custom mode. If I press OK now, then I go directly to the C1 to C4 memories, basically. These are all memories where you can set up any kinds of settings which you want to. So let me show you how to do it. First of all, you are all photographers and you are all shooting all kinds of genres. So you've got 4 memories. So you should first of all figure out which types of photography you are shooting most and which genres actually you want to have memorized within the camera or in the camera. So I would say that, for example, maybe some of you is wildlife photographer. Yeah. So if you are a wildlife photographer, you would want one of the settings, for example, C1, to be set it for shooting mammals or for shooting birds, depending whether you are a birder specializing in birding photography or mammals photography. Or you can say that, okay, C1 will be for moving animals or moving flying birds, for example, and C2 will be for kinds of portraits of animals, which are sitting, lying, standing, and so on. And for that, obviously, you need to do some kind of setup on the camera. So as I've resetted the camera now, I will show you a very brief setting, for example, for mammals. So what I would do is, first of all, I will probably switch to either shutter priority or manual mode. One of these two I would use for animals, because I'm shooting animals in action most of the time. Yeah. So even the birds in flight. So as I said, there are 2 types, basically 2 basic types of photography of animals. Ones which are, let's say, not moving, and the other ones which are moving or flying, so in action. So if I want to take pictures of animals in action, then I obviously want to freeze them in the moment. So I want to have a control over speed settings. Yeah. So I will change the camera to shutter priority. That's first thing I would do. Second thing which I would do is I would not use a single AF, but I would definitely go to continuous autofocusing system. Because if the animals are moving, whether from left to right or the other way around, or even though they are moving towards you, and there is some kind of movement overall, then you want the camera to be able to track and refocus from one image to another if you are shooting sequential shooting. And this is yet another point which I will definitely set up. So not only continuous autofocus mode, but also I want to set up the sequential shooting. So from single mode, which is this one, I would go to sequential shooting. And now it depends if you want to choose a mechanical shutter or you want to use electronic shutter. Obviously, mechanical shutter is slower, first of all. And secondly, it makes noises. So depending on the type of shooting, especially with animals, I would strongly recommend that you use electronic shutter, which doesn't make any sounds. So the camera is totally silent and it's just shooting very fast sequential shooting. Obviously, you can also use even faster sequential shooting, which would be SH1 or SH2. So all these sequential shootings can be used. SH1, SH2 are both in electronic shutter because they are extremely fast. They can reach up to 120 frames per second. And that is in raw data. Imagine that, this camera is capable of shooting 120 images per 1 second in full raw data. This is something totally unbelievable. Our previous cameras like EM1X, EM1 Mark III, and so on, they were able to shoot 60, which was already, amazing. And so you would want to set up the sequential shooting I personally would stay with the very basic one, with the very basic sequential shooting, which is up to 20 frames per second, which is totally enough for me for shooting mammals. Maybe if I was shooting birds, I would choose the faster sequential shooting, but for mammals, it's okay with 20 frames per second for me. Obviously, it depends on the genre, on the animal, on the action which you are shooting. It's up to you what you choose. And we'll later on also get to the sequential shooting settings. Then what would I also check? I would check that the face detection is turned off. Definitely it needs to be turned off, because if you turn it on, it may happen from time to time. It's not like every time, but from time to time it may happen that the camera will find something that resembles a human face in trees, in grass, somewhere where there is obviously no human being, but it may find some similar points like two eyes, nose, and lips. And then obviously it will try to focus somewhere else than where you want it to focus. So this is what I would set up, first of all. So I've got the shutter speed, I've got a CAF, I've got sequential shooting, the electronic one, the 20 frames per second. And then I would most probably go, again, depending on what type of shooting it is, whether it's a daylight in Africa, in safari, then I would just leave it to ISO 200 to the very best image, But if not, I may also go, if it's let's say slightly darker conditions, I go to ISO 800, 1600, or even more. But let's say we are going for safari where the weather is absolutely beautiful, amazing. So I will stay with ISO 200. So I've done all these settings. Plus one more thing, which definitely I would do is, this is JPEG, large fine, but I will certainly want to switch it to a combination of JPEG plus RAW. And depending, again, on what quality JPEG you want, you can either choose from large normal, large fine, or large superfine. The size in pixels is the same. It's 5184, as you can read it down there, times 3888. So this is the number or the size of the picture in pixels. But the compression of the JPEG is different. So large normal has a big compression, a large fine is slightly smaller compression, and large superfine is the very best JPEG that the camera is actually capable of achieving. And if you change it here directly in the control panel, just like this, you can also see the number below LF plus RAW or LM plus RAW and so on. The number below actually tells you how many pictures you can store on the card which you have inserted right now in the camera. So it's 1600 in LF plus RAW. In LN, which is bigger compression, it's even more, it's 1800. But if I go to the best JPEG, which is large superfine, it's, well, only 1400 images, but it's JPEG plus RAW again. In this case, if I'm choosing JPEG plus RAW, then I don't care about white balance, because obviously the white balance will influence the JPEG, but it never touches the raw data. Raw data, actually, you will be able to influence the white balance later on in the post-processing in the computer. So you don't need to worry about what color the image actually gets. So this is what I would set up, but there is still one or actually two things which I need to take care of. One of them is focusing points. So what I will do is, on the back of the camera, there's this kind of joystick. And I'm not talking about these arrows surrounding the OK button. I'm talking about the joystick, which is in the upper, let's say, right corner of your LCD screen. And if I just push this joystick towards one of the sides, then this green focusing point appears. Once it's green, you can change it via the dials, which is either the front dial here or the back dial here for your thumb. So one of the dials, if you use them, you can switch the shape of the focusing point very quickly, very easily, like this. These are the default focusing sizes and shapes which are in the camera. They are somehow built in the camera. Obviously, you can choose one of them. But as we have been discussing in one of the previous YouTube videos, which you can find on YouTube, where we are talking about all about focusing on OM-1, you can also create your own shape, your own focusing shape, not just these ones. But let's say for the mammals, which I'm going to be shooting, I need somehow slightly larger focusing area. So I would either use this 3x3 or 5x5 focusing area, which I can actually very quickly move from one side to another, either by using arrows or by using the joystick. I mean, whichever way you prefer. Yeah, so you can very quickly and easily move this area around the whole screen. So this is what I would set up also. And as you have got OM-1 camera, OM-1 camera has this amazing feature like EM1X had it, but OM-1 is even better because it has the subject detection, let's say artificial intelligence or intelligent focusing system. And this is something that you set up in the menu. If you go down into the menu and you scroll down to AF and you go to the second page, which is right here, then on the second page, down there, there is this subject detection. It's turned off, as you can see now. If I press the OK button, then immediately I am in the selection of the subject. So I can use the, let's say, motorbikes, cars, racing cars, and so on, planes, obviously, trains. And then, as I was talking about shooting animals, then you can choose from birds or mammals. Well, we are describing it as dogs and cats, but basically all the mammals we have tried so far are somehow being detected. So the camera perfectly works on your safari if you're shooting elephants, if you are shooting zebras, giraffes, I mean, everything. So I would choose the mammals. And once I press it, it stays there. And then if I go to the live screen, then immediately what I can see in the upper part of the screen, there is this symbol of the cat's head. Yeah. On the right side of the screen, I see the CAF. I see the symbol of the sequential shooting. And in the upper part, I see the JPEG LSF, which is large superfine, plus raw data. So all these things, which I have set it up, are there. Also, what I can see in the yellow color is the exposure time, so the speed of the aperture of the shutter, speed of the shutter. So basically, by just simply using the rear dial, by scrolling the thumb from right to the left, I am simply changing the speed of the shutter. And with the front dial, which is here, just below the shutter release button, right here, I am changing the exposure compensation. So I can either make the image slightly brighter, slightly darker, depending on, again, on the situation, on how we want the image to look like. So now we have just talked about, let's say, preparation. I have been setting up something, and this something is for shooting, let's say, mammals, for shooting animals on the run. So now I want to memorize it. I want to memorize it into the camera memory. How I do it? Again, I press menu button. I go to number 1. I go to custom modes, as we have already been there. And now I just need to choose which one is going to be for animals. Let's make it C1. Okay, so C1 for us will be the mammals shooting. And if I press OK button now, I'm entering the C1 menu. And now I do have a possibility to assign everything that is set in the camera right now. Everything that I just showed you will be set. If I press set, will be set into the camera. And if I go back now to the main menu, then you already see that C1 does not have these 2 lines, but it has the word set, which means that C1 is set already. So everything is being memorized. Let me show you how I can just prove it. In the control panel, let me just quickly switch all these back to the standard, let's say, default settings. So let's just make this JPEG. Let's switch ISO to, for example, ISO Auto. And OK, and let's switch also the focusing point to the very small one. And we can also basically turn off in the menu very quickly in the subject detection. We can also turn off the subject detection. OK, so now I have turned all this off. So you can see the description on the screen now is just single AF, is just large normal. Obviously, the shutter priority stayed there because I'm setting it up in the shutter priority. As you can see, it is still S, right? But now, if I go to the C1 menu, I just switched the exposure modes dial to the C1. And if I look on the menu, on the screen, now you can see it's all set up back to what I have memorized to the camera. So there is the CAD, there is the CAF, there is the sequential shooting, there is everything. And one control thing, how you can actually know that it is the C1 setting, is in the left bottom corner. If you look in the left bottom corner, there is this S, which means shutter priority, but just next to the S, there is the C1. So it is the shutter priority, but you know that it is set in the C1 mode. It is memorized in the C1 mode very easily. So this is how you can do it very quickly, and basically you can set up all other different genres like this. Let me just quickly show you, for example, a setting for shooting, let's say, shooting people, because we are all shooting all kinds of genres like animals, birds, nature, macro and stuff like that. But in the same time, we are all shooting events, whether it's family events or concerts, people around you, friends and so on. So I would call all this, let's say, people reportage photography for myself. So what I would do is I would just very quickly go to probably aperture priority, because in this case, if I'm taking pictures of people, I most of the time use aperture priority, because I definitely do want to control the depth of field, because I want to have the faces sharp while the background want to be kind of defocused already. So I will go to aperture priority. And within this aperture priority, what I would set up is obviously, again, the ISO to certain level, again, depending on the situation. So let's make it ISO 800, because I will be shooting, let's say, indoors. You can also leave it obviously to ISO auto, and then just in the menu minimize the maximum level. It doesn't need to be 25,600, but you can lower it down to, for example, 6,400 if you don't want the ISO auto to go above this level. Yeah, this can be done in the menu. Well, as I'm talking about it, I will just show you very quickly. It's very fast. So we go to the yellow menu again, and you need to switch to the page 3. And then the ISO upper level is basically the very first point here. And there you can set it up. Yeah, so you can set up the limit to whatever you want to, for example, 6,400. And then in ISO auto, it will never go up. You can do it also separately for either manual mode if you want to implement manual mode or not. Yeah, in the automatic and aperture and shutter priority mode. So it depends what you want to. So basically, here is where you would limit the ISO auto limits. But let's go back to to what I wanted to show you. So for shooting, let's say, faces and people around you, friends, family, events, and so on, I would set up the ISO. Obviously, I want to have control above aperture, so I will want to have the shooting mode aperture priority. I will stick to single AF, because when I'm shooting people, I don't necessarily need to use continual autofocusing, because they are not like running around. Yeah, they are moving slightly slower than animals. But what I would want to do is I will still want to use sound sequential shooting. But in this case, I definitely will go into the menu, and I will limit the number of pictures and the sequential shooting as well. So I will go to page 7 in this yellow part, page 7, and you can go to sequential shooting settings. And the type of sequential shooting settings which I am choosing, which I have chosen in the control panel, was this one, the second one. And as you can see, it is 20 frames per second. Well, honestly, I don't need the camera to be that fast. If I'm, let's say, taking pictures of people who are shaking hands, greetings one another, whether it's a birthday celebration or something like that. So I will definitely limit it to, for example, 10 frames per second, which is perfectly enough for me. And what I also want to do is I want to limit the number of shots. So when I'm taking the pictures of people, let's say shaking hands, I don't want to have 50 images, of one and the same scene. So I'll probably limit it to maybe, well, something between 3 and 5. Well, let's make it 4. And in this case, if I do this, and then if I set up this sequential shooting, as you can see here, then it means that once I press the shutter button, and even if I keep it pressed, it will go in a speed of 10 frames per second, but it will never make more than 4 images. So it will just very quickly take 4 shots. And right after that, it will stop, and I need to release the shutter button and press it again if I want to continue shooting. Why am I doing this? Well, basically, the reason is very simple. If you are taking pictures of people and you take just one shot, so you would not be using sequential shooting, but just single shots like this, or with mechanical shutter, doesn't matter, then you might miss the right moment, or you can actually catch the moment where people, for example, they blinked, so they would have their eyes closed, or you would miss like the perfect moment. So it's better to have maybe 2, 3, 4 images of this certain moment, and you would choose then one of them. Obviously, the rest you would erase. It does take some time, obviously, then to actually go through the images, to manage it all, and to choose the right ones. But it's better to have the proper image actually on the card rather than none. Okay, so for people, I would choose this one. And what else would I do? Well, probably, again, I mean, depending on the situation, if it's just family stuff, I will probably not use raw data. If it's if you are, let's say, paid to shoot some event, then you definitely need to go and switch to some raw plus JPEG, because you need to have, let's say, full data. So you'll switch to raw. And obviously, one of the most important, you will switch to intelligent face detection. Because in this case, if we use intelligent face detection, then the camera will be able to automatically find faces. What I will do, I will just switch this nice flower by yet another background, which will be this picture. And let me just, let's say, zoom out a little bit and move my tripod head slightly. So what is happening now? Well, these are actually my kids, but this is like 10 or 12 years ago, so they shouldn't worry now. They are old enough now, so I hope they don't worry that they are being displayed like this. But anyhow, this is 3 faces, as you can see here. And with this intelligence face detection selected, it automatically detects 3 faces, as you can see. But only one of them is highlighted in white color, which means that this is actually the one that's going to be focused at. So as soon as I half press the trigger, you can see that the eye is going to be highlighted in green, red square, which means that if I take the picture now, then this eye is going to be in focus. But imagine you want to switch to a different face, which is maybe farther away. So how would you do it? Well, you need to set up one of your function buttons to this possibility. And how to do it, I'll show you very quickly. You just press OK button, because there is this very nice and beautiful shortcut in OM-1, and it's this gear. If you press this gear, you jump directly into button function settings, and here you have all the buttons which you can set up. I will discuss this a little bit later also, but let's say switch the functionality of the very first button, which is the exposure correction button. And let's switch it to the function which we need, and that is the choice of faces, or face selection it's called. So I choose this one. Now I see that next to this plus minus button, I've got this face selection symbol, which actually means that if I now press this button, this is the plus minus button, if I press it and keep it pressed, and in the same time I use my thumb, for example, to scroll the dial, the back dial, then what happens is what I'm going to show you. Then this is what's going to happen. It just jumps from one face to another very simply, very easily. Yeah. So this kind of, let's say, face selection is very quick, very easy, but you need to assign it to a certain button to have this kind of very quick access to it. So basically what we have done is we have done all these settings for, let's say, taking pictures of people. And now again, you want to memorize it. So what would you do? We again go to this, yellow basic settings image quality mode. And we just press the first one, which is custom mode again. And as we have already C1 occupied by this animal shooting setting, we go to C2 and do the same thing. We say assign, we say set, and that's it, basically. So if we go back now, we do have already C1 and C2 set. And you can do the same thing for C3. C3 can be, for example, macro shooting. Yeah, so you would want to have some kind of macro setup with the for example, focus bracketing or focus stacking setup. C4 can be, for example, pro capture shooting for you if you want to shoot some kind of these very precious moments which happens in a fraction of a second you know that they are going to happen, but you never know when exactly. So you will need this kind of Pro Capture functionality. By the way, the Pro Capture you will find, if you just want to find it, the Pro Capture is here in this setup where you are choosing this sequential shooting and so on. Then you will go to Pro Capture, SH1, SH2, which is faster one, and then there's this the other modes. So basically, in this particular place, you will be able to choose the Pro Capture. But anyhow, we do have these two setups. And now again, if I go and switch to C2, then what happens on my back display, you can see that it is set for face detection. Left button corner, aperture priority, it shows me that it's C2, so it's memorized. Right side, single AF, phase detection, sequential shooting, above, upper part, large fine plus raw data. So all this is set up. I can very easily, using my back dial, I can very easily change the aperture, which I want to. Obviously, when shooting or taking pictures of people, I would most of the time use the most open aperture. In this case, this is 12 to 40 millimeter, 2.8 professional or pro lens. So I would probably most of the time be using 2.8. If the image seems to be maybe too dark, then I will just use the front dial to make it lighter. Sometimes it might be too bright, so you will go just to the darker positions with the exposure shift. So we can do all this. Now, what if you, for example, what if you want to, let's say, assign it not to these dials, but you want to have even faster access to these C memorized settings? You can have a faster access, and the faster access is realized by function buttons. And as you know, there are many of them. There's this red button, there's this exposure compensation button. There are two buttons actually between the lens and the grip right here in front of the camera. Obviously, there are the three buttons on the back. One is ISO in here. Another one is AF on, autofocus on. Another one is auto exposure lock. So there are like 1, 2, 3 other buttons on the back of the camera. And all these buttons, they do have a default function from the factory settings, but they can be, let's say, reassigned. And if I press the control panel and just show you how to do it, you can either do it this way, which I have already shown you. You just press OK, and you jump directly to the function buttons. Or you can do it another way, which is obviously more complicated, but you can go to the menu, you go to the gear, and the very first page and the very first option is button settings. So these button settings get you via the button functions directly to where we have just been a few seconds ago, to settings of the buttons. But if you go via menu, you can set up the camera or set up functions for photo shooting, but also for video shooting. Yeah, so you can actually have the same button with different function once you are taking video or once you are taking pictures. So it can have one and the same button can have different functions in different modes. But let's go to the button functions now. So what you can do is, as I've already shown you, I've described already, you can set it up, for example, to the face selection. But let me just show you also one thing, and this is it. As you can see, you can also assign the buttons to be C1 or your C2 or your C3 or your C4 settings, which are memorized. So once you memorize the settings, where I've just shown you via this yellow menu, custom modes, you memorize it into the memory. Then you can choose one of the buttons on the camera as a shortcut. So let's say that I will have this button to a C1 setting. Okay, now you can, as you can see, on the left side there's this plus minus, and the right column there's the C1. And let's say that the video recording button I will be using for the C2 settings, which I've just set up. So now it's C1, C2 right there. And if I look at the camera, then very simply and very easily, I'm holding the camera via the grip. I'm using my front finger for taking the pictures using the shutter release button. But I can just very quickly move my finger to one of the two buttons, saying and pressing it. And if I press it, now I just turned on the C1 settings. Now I turned it off. If I use the red button, now I turned on the C2 settings, and now I turned it off again. So it's as easy and as quick. I will show you how it is. So now I'm pressing the red button, and now I'm sorry. Yeah, you can see the cat above and CAF and the sequential shooting. So all these things are basically set up into the memory, and just by using one and the same button, you can very quickly switch to the modes you have memorized. You can also be using these modes when being in a different let's say exposure mode. So for example, if I'm going to be in the shutter priority mode, which means that I will switch to from the C1 or C2, which I was previously, I will switch to shutter priority here. Then I can very simply, just by pressing the red button, I'm switching, as you can see, to the sequential shooting and the JPEG and so on. So you can memorize these to certain buttons. What else can you do on the camera? What else can you change? How else can you, let's say, define the camera? You can go to the main menu again, to the gear. And in the gear, you don't necessarily need to just set up the buttons. You can also change the functionality of the dials. So if you press this dial, and again, you can choose between the video mode or the photo mode. If I go to the photo mode, because we want to stay in photo today, then I can also choose one of the exposure modes, whether it's programmed, aperture priority, shutter priority, or in manual and bulb. So again, let's say that I'm using aperture priority as mode, so I want to set this one up. And I press OK button. Then what it shows me is how the front dial and the back dial is going to behave once I switch the lever, which is directly next to the viewfinder. If you look at your camera from the back side, and on the right side, you can see the AEL button. And just surrounding this AEL button, there is the lever. And you can switch the position of the lever from number 1 to number 2. So there are two positions of the lever. And what is happening is that they are actually choosing the functionality of the dials by simply switching this lever from one position to another one. So if I say, okay, I want to have this, the front dial will be for exposure correction, back dial will be for aperture priority, and then if I switch the lever to position number 2, then the front dial will be changing ISO and the back dial will be changing white balance. You can obviously change it, as you can see, but let's just leave it to this, to the white balance for now. And I press OK. Then I go back to the menu. Then I still need to do one more thing. You need to set this lever, this lever which switches from number 1 position to number 2 position. If you go here again in the photo mode, you need to switch to mode 1 because this one will change the dial functionality. So I press OK, and right now what I will be doing is that basically I will be using the front dial and the back dial to change if I'm in aperture priority mode, because this is the one I just set it up in the menu. Then what's going to happen by using these two dials, the front dial changes exposure correction, the back dial changes aperture, which is absolutely perfect. This is exactly what you want to. But now if I just switch the lever from position number 1 to position number 2, you can see that what's highlighted in yellow now is not aperture and exposure compensation, but it is the white balance and ISO. So now I'm using the same front dial and same back dial as before, and I'm changing actually the white balance and I'm changing the ISO. So very simply, by changing this lever, you can switch the functionality of the two dials. And now I switch it to position number 1, and again, it's aperture and exposure compensation. But it's not just about this. You can also, in the lever settings, you can also stay in the mode 2, which will do something slightly different. And this time, if we keep level 2, then it's going to switch us the focusing functionality. As you can see in the upper right corner, there is this SAF, single autofocusing mode symbol. This is when the lever is in position number 1. If I quickly switch to position number 2, it goes to manual focus, as you can see. So it's very easy to switch from manual to automatic mode just by switching the mode which I'm doing right here. It's on the back. You cannot see it from this position, but it's the lever switching it up and down. But it doesn't necessarily need to be SAF and manual focus. It can be anything else. So imagine you are a wildlife shooter and you are very often using CAF, continuous autofocusing mode. In the same time, obviously you are not using phase detection, so we will turn off the phase detection because we are shooting, let's say, flying birds, for example, or other animals. So we want to have this turned off, the phase detection. But we not only chose the CAF, continuous autofocus mode, but we also can change the focusing shape. How we do it is, again, I take the joystick, I just push the joystick to one of the sides, it doesn't matter, so that the autofocusing point is highlighted in green. And once it's highlighted green, I can use either the front dial here or the back dial here, very quickly, to change the shape of the focusing point, to simply change the area. So I'm changing the shape. Let's leave this cross, for example. But I can also change the position. So I'm going to move it to this, let's say, left corner and leave it here. So it stays up there. You can see the black brackets in the left upper corner. So the focusing point is there, and CAF is there as well. And if I switch the lever next to the viewfinder now to the number 1 position, I can also do some changes with it. So I will leave, for example, single AF. And I want to have, for example, the tiniest points because I will be shooting, for example, macro in this mode. And again, I will just move it, for example, right here so that you can see it more properly, more easily. So now by switching the lever from position number 1 to position number 2, as you can see, changes single autofocus to continuous autofocus. It also changes the shape of the focusing point, and it also changes the position of it. Very quickly, just like that. Once you highlight it in green by simply shifting the joystick to one of the sides and basically pressing the joystick, because the joystick can not only be shifted towards sides, as you are moving the focusing points around, but it can also be pushed or pressed. So if you press the joystick, then the focusing point basically goes back to its default position, which is center. So if I am pressing it now, it goes to the center. Same if I am switching, for example, the lever to the number 2 position, which means that the focusing point is in the upper corner. And if I press it now, it goes immediately right to the center. Because many of you are, for example, used from older cameras to use the focusing point directly in the center, in the middle. So this is one of the very easiest ways of how to get it back there into the center very quickly by simply highlighting it in green and then by pressing this joystick. Okay, so once we are speaking or talking about the joystick, we can also actually have a look at something else, and that is the multi-selector settings, because this is exactly what I personally call a joystick. Officially, it's called multi-selector, but I'm calling it joystick because it reminds me of a small, tiny joystick, which we used to have on laptops ages ago. It was in the middle of the keyboard. Many of you probably remember in the middle of the keyboard, there was this usually red, tiny joystick. Okay, so the default setting of this joystick is that once you press it, basically nothing happens. Let me show you. If I'm in the photographic mode, so live screen, live view, which I'm now, then by simply pressing this joystick, nothing happens. So in order to actually highlight the focusing area, you need to push the joystick towards one of the sides. But as you could see, what happens if I am pushing it towards one side, it actually not only highlights it in green and activates the focusing point, but it also shifts it towards the side where you are actually moving the joystick. And if you don't want this, if you just want to highlight it, you either need to assign one of the function buttons to activate the focusing point, which is obviously possible. I will just very quickly show you where this is. You just go to button settings again. Let's choose this one, for example, and you would need to go here, AF area select. So by this one, if I now press this button, again, I'm always using this exposure correction button. So by pressing this button now, it's going to highlight the focusing point and not moving it. But I'm talking about the joystick now. So if I change the functionality of the joystick, basically the other way around than the default setting is, because the default setting is that the center button is off and direction key is set up to actually activate it. So what I will do is I will turn this one off and I will center button switch to this position. So I just changed the functionalities of the let's say of this button. So now if I press the joystick, I'm activating the joystick, not moving it around. Obviously, now I can just move it to wherever I want to, either by the joystick or by the arrow buttons. It depends on you or how you want it. But this is exactly the way I think which makes life slightly easier again when you are choosing and changing the focusing points, focusing areas. You just press the joystick and then you can use one of the front or back dials to change the shape and then just simply move it around. Yeah. So this is another part which you can actually set up and let's say customize. So you can customize not only function buttons, you can customize the dials, and you can also customize the joystick in here. And as we have said, you can also customize the lever settings, which is the lever changing the position from number 1 to number 2. And there is also a number 3 position, or let's say functionality of the lever. And if you switch to number 3, then it basically switches from a photo mode to a video mode. So by turning it to number 1 position, now it's a photo mode and I will be taking pictures. And if I just quickly want to switch to a video mode, I will just switch the lever to number 2 position and it goes to a video mode and I will be recording now. So this is the functionality. And electronic zoom, obviously you still have the option to set up electronic zoom, but this functionality only works with lenses which do have and do offer electronic zooms. And basically with Micro Four Thirds, as you know, we do have 2 lenses, or actually one of them is not in production anymore, is the 1250. To me, it was a brilliant lens, actually. 1250, you probably remember it. Some of you might have it. It was an amazing lens, which has this nice focal length from 12 to 50, which is equivalent to 24 to 100 millimeters. And second, let's say, advantage was that it not only had mechanical zoom, but also electronic zoom. So in photo, you would probably be using mechanical zoom. And in the video mode, it's obviously better to use electronic zoom because it's more, let's say, fluent. The changing the focal distance is much better when it's done electronically. And plus, it had one more advantage, the third one, and it had the macro mode, so you could actually switch the focusing mode to a macro mode. Okay, so this is the electronic zoom. Plus, obviously, we still do have this 1442, which is the tiny pancake lens. And it also does have electronic zoom, so you can change the speed of the zooming. And the last but not least functionality is the lock, and this is actually this button on the left side of the viewfinder from my point of view right now, where you normally are setting up the AF position and the exposure measurement, and obviously changing the sequential shooting and flash and so on. So these 2 buttons are normally serving as shortcuts to these, let's say, functionalities. But if you don't want to use these 2 buttons, or you are, let's say, afraid that you would accidentally press it, then you can very simply turn it off. So it will actually lock these buttons. So once it's on, these buttons are locked, and it means that you cannot accidentally press it, and you will simply not be using these 2. So this is how you can actually set up your camera very quickly, very easily. And let me just very briefly go through some of your questions, because I'm sure there will be some. And I'm just going through. Okay, so I'm at the beginning. It's all hellos. OM-1, best way to reset to my default settings while using C1, C4 dial selection. Best way to reset to my default settings. I'm not quite sure I understand this question, David. You want to reset to your default settings, or you want to reset to, okay, maybe I think I know what you are hitting at. If we go to the menu, and if we go to this area, again, to setting up the custom modes, there's something I forgot to tell you, and that's maybe the question from David. if I have the memorized set, which actually says that assign is set, so the C1 setting was shooting of animals, you can also change the saving settings by either holding them or by resetting them. If you keep the reset, then it actually means one thing. Let me switch to C1 mode on the camera. So I will be switching to C1. Now, if you look on the display, then we see that the animal is on, CAF is on, sequential shooting is on. It's simply ready for shooting animals right now, okay? Even my AF point is basically where I want it to be, yeah, the big one in the middle. Now, if I kept this thing, and I'm going to go back there again to reset, then it means that every single change that I do now, for example, I decide to switch the white balance to whatever, 7,500 kelvins, I will decide that I will be shooting 16:9, for example, and I will decide that I will use ISO auto, for example, yeah, which now it's very dark here, so it's going to give me 25,600 ISO. So I have made all these changes now. The image actually looks very weird with 7,500 kelvins under this lighting which I have here. So it's all orange. But anyhow, I have made all these changes. And but now, if I want to go back to my default settings, I have two options. You know, I'm into this default settings, which I memorized to the C1. I have two options. One of them is recall. So if I go to recall them and say yes, then I am back to what I have memorized originally to the C1 position, as you can see, right? So it's one of the ways how to do it. Another one is, let me just make the changes again, some of them. Okay, let's go to the orange color again. So I'll just make these two changes and that's it. Or okay, let's switch to 16:9 so that we have it exactly the same one. So I have made these changes, and now I can go back to my default settings very quickly and easily by simply switching from C1 to any other, let's say, mode, for example, to shutter priority mode, whatever, and then going back to the C1 mode. And now I'm back again. So these are two ways how you can actually recall what you have memorized. But obviously, there might be situations where you don't want to actually go back to your original settings, but you want some of the settings which you are doing in the C1 mode, some of the changes, you want the camera to memorize. So the way to do this is, let me just move my image, is to go to save settings and to the hold functionality. Because the hold functionality will actually keep the changes which you would now do. So if I go to 16:9, and if I go to ISO whatever auto, for example, and switch again the white balance to whatever 7,500, then basically now it's going to be memorized in the C1 settings. Yeah. So if I go back there again, it's going to stay like this. Honestly, personally, I prefer to always go back to the original settings. And if I during the shooting, of, for example, animals, birds, and so on, if I find out that one of the features somehow is missing in my memorized settings, then I will simply, let's say, reprogram it again, and I will program it including this one setting. Obviously, you can also do it via the hold functionality, and so let's say this way, save it into the camera memory. So I hope, David, that this answered the question, and let me just go to some other questions. Carol is asking, can you tell me how to set up back button focus on the OM-1? Once set up, can it be assigned to one of the custom buttons? Well, actually, it is the back button focus is actually set on OM-1 camera. So if you look on your camera, well, let me just reset all these terrible orange stuff. Let me just go back to some basic settings. Okay, and let's switch this back. Okay, well, it's not really necessary to change all this, but and the 16:9 is terrible. I just hate this one. Yeah, now I see all my kids fully. Okay, so basically, if you press the back AF on button right here, then it's from the default setting, it's programmed to focus. So what it will do is once you press it, it's going to be focusing. Same way as if you be half pressing the shutter button. Obviously, it can be programmed in the menu to different kinds of other modes. But basically, if you go to the control panel, let me just go to the control panel and go to the function button settings. Then yes, you can find one of the functionalities would be AF on here. See, so basically the AF on button, which is on the back of the camera, and you would normally be using the thumb to actually activate the AF on. You can assign this functionality to any other function button. So it can be the red recording button, it can be exposure button, it can be ISO button, it can be anything. Yeah. So the AF on can be switched from the original AF on button to any other one. Okie dokie. So I'm just looking at the time. Time is running so fast today. So let me just go to some other questions. And let me see. It's not a question, Francesca. No sunny at the moment. We need some rain. Oh, nice. Yeah, I can send you some rain, Francesca. Hopefully. So okay, how to customize? Yeah, I think Edward is asking about how to customize the FN1 and 2 lever. I think we have done this already. Oh, Michael. Hi, Michael. Actually, Michael, a great friend. Michael is telling me that he's watching. Thanks, Michael, and hello. And let me just switch the camera. Okay, is there any quick way of measuring the object distance for focus limiting without using pre-MF? Actually, pre-MF is the way. Yeah, so there's no other way how to measure the distance, but you can use the pre-MF. For those of you who don't know, if you press the OK button, let me just switch the camera again. If you use the control panel and go here to single AF, and you are switching the modes to whatever CAF tracking and so on, then in one moment you will hit the pre-MF button or pre-MF functionality. Once you press OK again, then it tells you settings info, which actually means you need to press the info button on the camera. Yeah. So I'm pressing the info button. Oh, sorry, it just went off again. So I'm pressing the info button now on the camera, and now it tells me that by actually pressing the shutter release button is going to measure the distance. So I half press it, and as you can see, it switched from 999 meters to 0.5 meters. It is actually not the distance from the front lens of the element, it is the distance from the sensor. Yeah, so you need to count the distance from the sensor itself, because sometimes if you are using 150 to 400 lens, which is quite tall, then it's definitely not the distance from the end of the lens, but it is the distance from where the image is being taken, so from the sensor. So now, if I press OK, then it's memorized. But basically, not only it's memorized, but it measured the distance for me. And this is the way how I will find out, for example, let's say, where the animals are grazing. If they are there out in the field, and they are grazing, for example, on the grass somewhere, and I want to take pictures of them, but I don't want the camera to be focusing to any other, let's say, branches and bushes which are closer to me, and I don't want the camera to focus on the big, far away, distant, forests or mountains. So I want to set up the limiter, and the limiter, obviously, you can do in the menu. Again, I will forward you to yet another YouTube video, which I have done about OM-1 focusing, and you will find everything about setting up the AF limiter there. Okay, let's tackle a few more questions, because now we are, as I see, we are hitting 1 hour already. Okay. Yeah, Michael, EM1 Mark III, yes, has a completely different menu and one has a renewed mount. Michael, thank you so much for helping me in answering questions. It is absolutely true that OMD cameras and OM5 camera has totally different menu. So far, I have done the OM5 and OMD cameras focusing, so all about focusing on these cameras, so you can go and look there. Maybe sometime in the future, we'll do also customizing, let's say, video about OMD and OM5 camera. But OM1, yes, absolutely, Michael, you are right. It does have a totally different menu. Hi, David. It's great to see you. Okay, it is great to see you too, or at least read your comments. Thanks. Okay, let's see some other questions from Toronto, from Nor. Obviously, President Burgers. Okay, so it's not a question. Sorry. Let me just try to find some other questions if there are some. Okay, nice question. When will they add insect recognition, such as butterflies and dragonflies, for in-flight photography? I don't know, Paul. I have to say I don't know. If ever, I don't know, but I mean, obviously, many of macro photographers would love to have such kind of functionality. But honestly, if you are shooting dragonflies, you might want to try the bird detection, because I've tried several times. I know many photographers who have tried as well. And to actually take pictures of flying dragonflies above the water level, it does work quite well. It's not like 100% like with the birds, but if you switch to bird subject detection, it will help you a lot. And it does detect the dragonfly, flying around, because it just, the camera just thinks it's a bird because it looks similar. Okay, let's see. I'm just going very quickly through some other questions. Oh yeah, Carol. Sorry, Carol. Please, please look at the video once again if you don't catch up. I know I'm talking very fast, but first of all, it's my nature, so I cannot change, even though I want to. And sometimes I try to speak a little bit slower. Then within a couple of seconds, I get back to my fast talk. So sorry for that. But as I said, it's going to be on the YouTube. You can let's say play it how many times you want to in the future. Okay, so let's see how to change C1 mode if you decide to change it. Yeah, this is something, Edward, we have already tackled. I mean, just very briefly and quickly, going back to the settings. So if you want to change it, you either say hold, which means that any change you do now in the C1 settings will be memorized in your C1 settings. Or if you don't want this, as I said again, you can very quickly reset it, and then it will stay the same way as you have memorized it at the very beginning. And obviously, you still have this kind of recall function as we have described already. So you can always recall the original memorized functionality from the memory of the camera. Okay, guys, I think we are just about almost at the end. Obviously, there are many other questions. I promised I will get back to all of those, not today, because it's almost evening here, but I still have to go to some other place this evening. But what I will do is I will go through other questions and I will write in the comments the answers to basically everything that you are asking. So thank you so much for coming to this Tech Expert Thursday, or Tech Thursday, as normally it's being done by David. And as I've said, he is the #1 tech expert. So look forward to his other let's say videos, other YouTube channels. And I will stay somewhere in the background. And from time to time, what I will do this kind of videos about focusing, as I've already done. So I might prepare some other videos about other parts of the menu which do not treat focusing this time, but treat some other settings. So have a great day, guys, or great evening, great afternoon, wherever you are from. And thank you so much for watching. And I hope we'll see you soon, and stay with our cameras. Now just take your OM-1 camera, grab it in your hand. If it's daylight, go out shooting. Try to use this kind of setup, customization, which we have learned today. And if you didn't have time to catch all this video, or if I was talking too fast, then watch it again, and you will, I'm pretty much sure you will catch it, all of it. Thank you so much. And as we say here in Czech, to all photographers, have a good light. Thank you and bye-bye.